She ran from a forced marriage at dawn, only to find the Duke already waiting in her path. The road to Dover stretched gray and endless before her, swallowed whole by mist that clung to the ground like something living. Henrietta Devereux pressed her heels into the mare's flanks, a borrowed animal really, stolen from her own family's stable in the dark hours before anyone stirred. The leather reins bit into her palms through thin gloves she'd grabbed without thinking. Her hands ached already, but she could not afford to stop. Behind her, somewhere in the fog and the fading night, Elmsworth Manor sat like a trap she'd barely escaped. The Devereux estate lay in the wild borderlands between Durham and Northumberland, close enough to Ashford lands that whispers traveled fast, far enough that her father had thought himself safe from the Duke's watchful eye. He had been wrong. The wedding dress still hung in her chamber, cream silk, seed pearls at the collar, a gown meant to transform her into the Marchioness Whitfield by midday. The thought made her stomach twist. She'd heard the whispers about the Marquis, the way servants spoke in voices that died when he entered a room. 2 wives before her, both dead within a year. Accidents, everyone said. Fell down the stairs. Fever, sudden and swift. Bad luck, surely. Henrietta had stopped believing in coincidence the night she'd overheard her father in his study, voice thick with brandy and desperation. She'll marry him, and that's final. The debts are settled. The arrangement is made. Her mother's reply had been softer, sadder. Even knowing what he might have done, her father corrected sharply. Rumors are not evidence, Constance. Henrietta had pressed her back to the wall outside the door, the cold seeping through her nightdress. In that moment, she'd understood with terrible clarity. Her father would sell her to the devil himself if it meant keeping the Devereux name from ruin, so she'd run. The mare stumbled slightly on a loose stone, and Henrietta's heart lurched. Easy. Just a bit farther to the old stone bridge. Then the turn-off toward the coast road. She had perhaps 3 hours before they discovered her gone. Perhaps less. Dawn was breaking now, pale and reluctant, turning the mist silver. She could make out the bridge ahead, a narrow arch of gray stone spanning the river that marked the edge of her father's property. Freedom lay on the other side. Newcastle lay beyond that, with its port and ships sailing to Scotland or across the sea. And a port meant escape, perhaps a ship's passage bought with the few coins she'd stolen, or a coaching inn where she might find work under a false name. Anything was better than... A figure stepped into the road. Henrietta jerked the reins so hard the mare reared, hooves pawing air. She barely kept her seat, pulse hammering in her throat as the animal danced sideways, snorting its displeasure. The man didn't flinch. He simply stood there, tall and dark against the lightning sky, blocking the bridge as if he'd been waiting. "Lady Henrietta," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I had wondered if you would come this way." She knew that voice. Everyone who moved in the circles of northern society knew that voice, though few had heard it spoken directly. Clarence Cavendish, Duke of Ashford, the Phantom Duke, they called him, appearing and disappearing from society as it suited him, always watching, always knowing things he should not know. Her grip tightened on the reins. "Your Grace." The words came out breathless, shaking. "I beg your pardon, I did not see you. If you would excuse me." "You are fleeing." It was not a question. Henrietta's jaw clenched. "I am riding, Your Grace, merely riding. At dawn, alone. In a riding habit thrown over your nightdress." His gaze flicked down, then back to her face, with the look of someone who does not intend to return. Heat flooded her cheeks. She'd barely dressed, grabbed the first thing she could find, shoved her feet into boots. Her hair hung loose down her back, uncovered, unbound. Scandalous. But scandal seemed a small thing compared to death. "What I do is my concern alone," she said, lifting her chin. "I have no wish to be rude, Your Grace, but I must insist you let me pass. Whitfield's men are searching for you." The Duke's expression did not change. "They left the manor 20 minutes ago. 4 men on horseback riding hard. They will reach this bridge in perhaps 10 minutes. The blood drained from her face. How do you? I have been watching Elmsworth Manor since midnight. He took a step closer, and she saw him clearly for the first time. Dark hair, longer than fashion dictated. A face that might have been handsome if it were not so cold, all sharp angles and harder lines. Eyes the color of smoke. I came to offer you an alternative. An alternative. Her laugh was bitter, broken. And what alternative might that be, Your Grace? Shall I return meekly to my father's house and marry a man who will likely murder me within the year? No. His hand moved to his coat, withdrawing something, a folded document, sealed with wax. You shall marry me instead. Silence. The mare shifted beneath her. Somewhere in the trees, a crow called out, harsh and final. Henrietta stared at the Duke, certain she'd misheard. I beg your pardon? Marry me, he repeated, as if it were the most reasonable suggestion in the world. There is a chapel half a mile through those woods, abandoned, but still consecrated. I have arranged for a priest. We can be wed within the hour. You cannot be serious. I am rarely otherwise. He held up the document. I have had my solicitor draw up a contract. You will become the Duchess of Ashford. In exchange, you will have my protection, my name, and my fortune. Whitfield cannot touch you. Your father's debts will be settled. You will be safe. Safe. The word hung in the cold morning air like a promise she dared not believe. Henrietta's hands trembled on the reins. Why? Why would you do this? Something flickered across his face. So quick she almost missed it. Pain, perhaps. Or memory. I have my reasons. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you will receive at present. The sound of hoofbeats echoed in the distance, faint but growing louder. The Duke's gaze did not waver. You have perhaps 3 minutes to decide, Lady Henrietta. Return to your fate with Whitfield or trust me. Choose quickly. She looked back down the road. Saw nothing yet, but she could hear them now. Horses at gallop, men shouting. Her father's voice, sharp with fury. They would drag her back, force her into that dress, stand her before the altar beside a man with blood on his hands. Or she could trust a stranger who somehow knew she would run, who had been waiting, prepared, as if he'd planned this down to the minute. A stranger with secrets in his eyes and a reputation for vanishing like smoke. The hoofbeats grew louder. Henrietta looked at the Duke, at his steady gaze, his outstretched hand holding the contract she had not read. Very well, she whispered. His fingers closed around the reins of her horse. Follow me. He turned and led her off the road into the trees where the mist clung thick and close. Behind them the shouts grew closer. But Henrietta did not look back. The chapel was a ruin, not entirely. The roof still held mostly, though gaps showed where slates had fallen away. The stone wall stood solid enough, covered in ivy that had crept through the mortar like grasping fingers. But the windows had lost their glass long ago, and the door hung crooked on rusted hinges. It looked less like a house of God and more like something from a ghost story. Henrietta's boots crunched on dead leaves as she dismounted. Her legs shook, from cold or fear or the sheer madness of what she was about to do. She could not say. The Duke stood beside her, already tying both horses to a half-fallen fence post. His movements were efficient, practiced. This was not the first time he'd done something like this, she realized. The thought should have frightened her. Perhaps it did. The priest is inside, he said without looking at her. He will perform the ceremony immediately. I have paid him well for his discretion. How did you know? The question burst from her before she could stop it. How did you know I would run? How did you know to be there, on that road, at precisely that moment? The Duke's hand stilled on the rope. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, I make it my business to know things, Lady Henrietta. That is not an answer. No. He turned to face her, and in the gray morning light, his face looked carved from stone. But it is all you will have. A door opened, A man emerged from the chapel, elderly, bent, wearing robes that had seen better days and a great many years. His eyes were rheumy but kind. He looked at Henrietta, then at the Duke, and something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or pity. "Your Grace," the priest said, his voice cracked with age. "The young lady has agreed, then?" "She has." The priest nodded slowly, looked at Henrietta. "Child, I must ask, do you enter this union of your own will?" "Did she?" Henrietta's throat tightened. Her own will seemed a distant thing now, drowned under the weight of desperation and the thunder of hoofbeats still echoing in her memory. But she thought of Whitfield's cold eyes, the two dead wives who'd had no choice at all. "I do," she said. "Very well." The priest gestured toward the chapel. "Come then, we should not delay." Inside, the chapel smelled of damp stone and old wood. A few broken pews remained, scattered like bones. Morning light filtered through the empty windows, painting patterns on the floor. At the far end, an altar still stood, cracked, tilted, but standing. Someone had placed 2 candles there, already lit. The flames wavered in the draft. Henrietta's heart hammered as she walked forward. This was madness. Marrying a man she did not know, in a ruin of a church, fleeing one prison only to enter another. But the Duke's presence beside her was steady, solid. He did not hurry her, did not touch her, simply stood, waiting, as if they had all the time in the world. They did not. Outside, distant but distinct, came the sound of horses. The priest cleared his throat. "We must begin." He spoke quickly, the words of the marriage ceremony stripped to their barest bones, devoid of the pomp and ritual Henrietta had always imagined for her wedding day. There were no flowers, no music, no family watching with tear-bright eyes. Just her and a stranger and a priest who would not meet her gaze for long. "Do you, Clarence John Cavendish, Duke of Ashford, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice did not waver. "And do you, Henrietta Margaret Devereux, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" She opened her mouth, hesitated. The candle flames bent in a sudden gust of wind through the broken windows. Outside, the horses had stopped. Men's voices calling out, searching. "I do," Henrietta whispered. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife." The priest made the sign of the cross over them, hasty and perfunctory. "What God has joined, let no man put asunder. You may seal the union. Your Grace." The Duke turned to her. Henrietta's pulse leapt. A kiss, of course, that was how it was done. But his eyes held a question, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something other than cold calculation there. Uncertainty, perhaps, or reluctance. He leaned in, his lips brushed her forehead, soft, chaste, gone. "We should go," he said, straightening. "They will search the woods soon." The priest handed him a document, the marriage certificate, Henrietta realized dimly. Proof of what she'd just done. The Duke folded it carefully, tucked it inside his coat alongside the contract she still had not read. Then he turned to her, offering his hand. She took it. His palm was warm, rough with calluses, not the soft hands of a gentleman who did nothing but attend balls and ride through Hyde Park. These were hands that worked, that held weapons perhaps, that had known violence. "Come, Duchess," he said quietly. "Let us leave this place." "Duchess." The word settled over her like a foreign cloak. She was a duchess now, the Duchess of Ashford, married to a man whose Christian name she'd only just learned. Clarence. It suited him somehow. Old-fashioned, formal, cold. Outside, the Duke led her to the horses, but he did not mount immediately. Instead, he moved to the edge of the trees, peering through the underbrush toward where the voices still called out. Henrietta watched him. The way he stood, utterly still, listening. The way his hand rested near his coat, where a weapon might be hidden. "Who are you?" she whispered. He glanced back at her. "Your husband." "That is not what I meant." "I know." He returned to the horses, untying them swiftly. But it is the only answer that matters at present. He helped her mount, his hands steady on her waist, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Then he swung onto his own horse, a massive black gelding that tossed its head impatiently. The animal suited him, dark, restless, barely restrained. "We ride for Ashford House," he said. "It is 3 hours from here, across the border into Northumberland. Once there, you will be safe. Whitfield cannot reach you." "How can you be certain?" His smile was thin, humorless. "Because I will be standing between you and him, and I am far more dangerous than the Marquis could ever hope to be." He turned his horse and rode into the trees. Henrietta followed, her heart still racing, her mind churning with questions she dared not ask. Behind them, the voices faded. The chapel disappeared into the mist. She was married now, to a stranger, to a duke who moved through shadows and spoke of danger as if it were an old friend. She was the Duchess of Ashford. The horses' hooves thudded on the forest floor, steady and sure. They rode in silence for the better part of an hour. The forest gave way to open moorland, rolling hills covered in brown grass and scattered stone, the sky above them vast and gray. The wind picked up as they climbed higher, biting through Henrietta's thin riding habit until her teeth chattered. She'd left without a cloak, without proper clothing, without anything save the desperate need to escape. The Duke noticed. He must have, though he said nothing. But when they stopped to rest the horses beside a small stream, he removed his own coat and held it out to her. "You are cold," he said. It was not a question. Henrietta stared at the coat, dark wool, well made, still warm from his body. "I could not possibly—" "You will freeze before we reach Ashford House at this pace." He stepped closer, draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. The weight of it settled around her like an embrace. It smelled of leather and smoke and something else, something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken in a way she did not care to examine. "Wear it." She pulled the coat tighter, grateful despite herself. "Thank you, Your Grace." "You may call me Clarence." He turned away, moving to check the horse's hooves. "We are married now. The formality seems unnecessary." Clarence. The name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate. But he was right. She could hardly spend the rest of her life addressing her husband by his title. "Very well. And you may call me Henrietta." "I know your name." "Of course you do." A bitter laugh escaped her. "You seem to know a great deal about me, Your Clarence. My habits, my plans, even my desperation." His hand stilled on the horse's leg. "I told you. I make it my business to know things." "About women fleeing arranged marriages at dawn." "About Whitfield." He straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "I have been investigating him for months." The admission hung in the air between them. Henrietta's breath caught. "Investigating? Why?" "Because he is a murderer." The Duke's voice was flat, matter of fact. His first wife did not fall down the stairs. She was pushed. The second wife did not die of fever. She was poisoned, slowly, over weeks, while the physicians called it consumption. Henrietta's stomach turned. "How do you know this?" "I have sources, people who see things others miss. Servants who will speak for the right price. A physician who was suspicious but too frightened to voice his concerns publicly." He moved toward her and his eyes held something fierce, almost feral. "I have been gathering evidence for months, enough to see him hang if I can present it properly." "Then why not go to the magistrate? Why this?" She gestured between them. "Why marry me?" "Because evidence alone is not enough when a man has the connections Whitfield has. He is well liked at court, has friends in the House of Lords. Any accusations against him would need to be ironclad, unimpeachable." He paused. "And because by marrying you I remove his most immediate victim from his reach while I finish building my case. You saved me." The realization struck her like a blow. "You were not offering me an alternative. You were saving my life." "I was doing both." His expression softened slightly. "And I was fulfilling a debt." "What debt?" The softness vanished. His jaw tightened and he turned away. "That is not a story I am prepared to tell at present." Henrietta wanted to press, to demand answers. But something in his posture, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides, told her the conversation was over. Whatever debt he owed, whatever drove him to stand on a misty road at dawn and offer marriage to a fleeing woman, it was buried deep, painful. She would not unearth it by force. "Very well," she said quietly. "But you must understand, I know nothing of you. Nothing of Ashford House. Nothing of what my life will be now. Your life will be your own." He returned to his horse, mounting in one fluid motion. "I require only that you play the part of my Duchess in public. Attend functions when necessary. Present a united front. In private, you may do as you wish." "In private?" Henrietta mounted her own horse, her heart sinking. "You mean we will not? That is, we will not share?" "No." The word was sharp, final. "I have no interest in a true marriage, Henrietta. You need not fear my attentions. I will not force my presence upon you." She should have felt relief, should have been grateful that he would not demand his marital rights, would not expect her body as payment for his protection. But instead, a strange hollowness opened in her chest. He had married her out of duty, out of some mysterious debt. Not because he wanted her. Well, what had she expected? Love? "I see," she said. "Then we have an understanding." "We do." He turned his horse toward the north. "Come, we have another hour before we reach Ashford House. I would prefer to arrive before nightfall." They rode on. The moor stretched endless before them, beautiful in its bleakness. Henrietta pulled the Duke's Clarence's coat tighter and tried not to think about the wedding she'd always imagined, the marriage she'd dreamed of as a girl, love and laughter and partnership. This was not that marriage, but it was survival. And perhaps, she thought as she watched the Duke's straight back, his steady hands on the reins, perhaps that would be enough. The wind picked up, cold and relentless. They had ridden for nearly 2 hours when the landscape began to change, the open moor giving way to more sheltered ground, stone walls marking the boundaries of great estates. And then, rising from the land like something inevitable, Ashford House appeared. Ashford House rose from the landscape like something out of a Gothic novel. It was not a house at all, really. It was a fortress. Gray stone walls towered 3 stories high, punctuated by narrow windows that glinted like watching eyes. Turrets flanked each corner, topped with battlements that had once served some defensive purpose, but now simply made the place look like it was still at war with the world. Ivy crept up the eastern wall, but even that seemed reluctant, as if the building rejected any attempt at softness. Henrietta's hands tightened on the reins. This was to be her home now, this cold, forbidding place. "It is imposing," she managed. "It is defensive." Clarence guided his horse through the iron gates which stood open as if expecting them. "My ancestor built it during the Wars of the Roses. Cavendishes have held this land for 400 years. We do not give it up easily." No, she supposed they did not. The courtyard was paved with gray stone, immaculately kept. A stable boy appeared from nowhere, taking the horses without a word. Servants emerged from the main doors, a stern-faced housekeeper in black, 2 footmen, a butler who looked as though he'd been carved from the same stone as the house itself. "Your Grace." The butler bowed. "We did not expect you until tomorrow. Plans changed." Clarence dismounted, then moved to help Henrietta down. His hands on her waist were impersonal, efficient. "Mrs. Fairweather, this is Her Grace, the Duchess of Ashford. Please prepare the Duchess's chambers immediately." The housekeeper's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of surprise she showed. "Your Grace, of course." She curtsied to Henrietta. "Welcome to Ashford House, Your Grace. If you will follow me, I shall show you to your rooms." Henrietta's head spun. Everything was happening too quickly. Hours ago, she'd been fleeing in a nightdress. Now she was a duchess, standing in a courtyard that looked like it belonged in a medieval siege, surrounded by servants who'd appeared to accept her presence without question. "Go," Clarence said quietly. "Mrs. Fairweather will see to your needs. I have matters to attend to. He was leaving her already. Of course he was. He'd said as much. They would maintain separate lives, separate chambers. She was merely a role to be played, a piece moved on whatever board he was navigating. "Very well," she said, pleased that her voice remained steady. Mrs. Fairweather led her inside. The entrance hall was vast, 2 stories high with a grand staircase that split in 2 directions at the first landing. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Cavendishes staring down with expressions ranging from stern to outright hostile. Henrietta shivered despite the warmth from the massive fireplace that roared at the far end of the hall. "This way, Your Grace," Mrs. Fairweather said, climbing the stairs. "The Duchess's chambers are in the West Wing." The West Wing. Henrietta noted the phrasing. Not your chambers, or the Duke's wife's chambers. The Duchess's chambers, as if the position were separate from the man who held its counterpart. As if duchesses came and went, but the role remained fixed. How many duchesses had walked these halls before her? The chambers, when they reached them, were beautiful. Unexpectedly so. While the rest of the house felt cold and fortress-like, these rooms were softly furnished in shades of cream and pale blue. A 4-poster bed dominated the bedroom, its curtains made of silk that would have cost more than Henrietta's father earned in a year. A sitting room adjoined it, with windows that overlooked a garden, bare now in late autumn, but clearly well tended. "The Duke had these rooms prepared 3 weeks ago," Mrs. Fairweather said, moving to open the wardrobe. "He commissioned a wardrobe as well. I hope the sizes are correct." Henrietta stared. Inside the wardrobe hung gowns, dozens of them. Morning dresses, walking dresses, evening gowns in silk and velvet and muslin. Undergarments, chemises, stockings, everything she could possibly need. 3 weeks ago. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew I would accept." Mrs. Fairweather's expression did not change. "His Grace is very thorough." Thorough, that was one word for it. Henrietta moved to the window, looking out over the garden. In the distance, she could see the moors stretching away, brown and endless. She was trapped here now. Not by force. Clarence had been clear she could do as she wished, but by circumstance, by the bargain she'd made, by the marriage certificate that bore her signature in ink that had barely dried. "Mrs. Fairweather," she said slowly, "how long have you served the Duke?" 20 years, Your Grace, since I was a young woman." "Then you know him well." A pause. "I know His Grace well enough to understand that he is a private man. He does not share his thoughts easily. Has he had other arrangements like this?" Henrietta turned to face the housekeeper. "Other marriages of convenience?" "No, Your Grace." Mrs. Fairweather's face was carefully neutral. "You are his first wife. His first wife, and likely his last, given the terms he'd laid out. A marriage in name only. Separate chambers, separate lives." "I see," Henrietta said. "Thank you, Mrs. Fairweather. That will be all." The housekeeper curtsied and withdrew, closing the door with a soft click. Alone, Henrietta sank onto the edge of the bed. The silk coverlet was soft beneath her hands. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the moors in shades of amber and gray. She was the Duchess of Ashford. She was married to a stranger, and she had no idea what happened next. A knock at the door made her jump. "Yes?" "Dinner will be served in an hour, Your Grace." A maid's voice, young and nervous. "His Grace requests your presence in the dining room." Her presence, not her company. The distinction felt important. "Thank you," Henrietta called. "I shall be there." She stood, moving to the wardrobe, selected a simple gown, nothing too fine, though even the simplest dress here was finer than anything she'd owned before. As she changed, her hands shook slightly. She caught sight of herself in the mirror, pale, frightened, still wearing her hair loose like a girl. She was 20 years old. She was a duchess. She would not cower. Henrietta pulled her hair back, pinned it into something resembling a proper style, smoothed the skirts of the gown, lifted her chin. Then she went to dinner with her husband. The dining room was as imposing as the rest of the house, a long table that could seat 30, though only 2 places were set. At opposite ends, Clarence stood as she entered. He'd changed as well, now dressed formally in dark evening clothes. His hair was damp, as if he'd bathed. "You found everything satisfactory in your chambers?" "Yes." She took her seat, a footman appearing to push it in for her. "Everything is generous. I had hoped it would suit." He sat, and servants began bringing food. Too much food, course after course, enough to feed a dozen people. Did they always eat like this? Or was this for her benefit? They ate in silence for several minutes. The only sounds were the clink of silver on china and the crackling of the fire. Henrietta searched for something to say, some way to break the awkward quiet, but her mind remained stubbornly blank. Finally, Clarence spoke. "You must have questions." "I have dozens of questions." She set down her fork. "But I suppose the most pressing is this. What happens now? Now you live here, as my Duchess." "Yes, you've said that. But what does it mean? What will my days look like? What do you expect from me?" He considered this, swirling wine in his glass. "I expect you to manage the household, as duchesses do. Mrs. Fairweather will assist you. I expect you to accompany me to necessary social functions, balls, dinners, events where my absence would be noted. And I expect you to maintain the fiction of our marriage publicly. And privately? Privately, as I said, you may do as you wish. Read, ride, walk the grounds. The house is yours. The staff are yours to command. I will not interfere. Because you will not be here." It was not a question. His jaw tightened. "I have business that often takes me away." "Yes." "Business." She leaned forward. "You mean your investigation of Whitfield? Among other things. Will you tell me about it? About what you're trying to do?" "No." The word was flat, final. "It is better that you know nothing. Safer." "Safer for whom? You or me?" "Both." He set down his glass. "Henrietta, I understand this situation is not what either of us might have chosen, but I gave you my protection, and I will honor that. In return, I ask only that you not press me for information I cannot safely share." "Cannot or will not?" she wanted to ask. But his expression had shuddered again, that cold mask sliding back into place. "Very well," she said quietly. "I suppose we both have our secrets." Something flickered in his eyes. "What secrets do you have, Duchess?" "Nothing of consequence." She stood, and immediately a footman pulled her chair back. "If you will excuse me, Your Grace, I find I am quite tired. It has been a rather extraordinary day." He stood as well, nodding. "Of course. Sleep well." She left him there alone at that enormous table, surrounded by food he would not eat and candles that made his face look carved from shadow. In her chambers, Henrietta undressed with shaking hands, pulled on one of the soft linen nightdresses from the wardrobe, climbed into the enormous bed, and tried not to think about the fact that her husband slept somewhere else in this cold house, behind doors she would not cross. Outside, an owl called. 3 weeks passed. Henrietta fell into a routine of sorts. She woke each morning to a maid bringing chocolate and opening the curtains. She dressed in gowns that still felt too fine, too expensive. She breakfasted alone. Clarence was always gone before she rose, off to whatever mysterious business occupied his days. She spent her mornings with Mrs. Fairweather, learning the intricacies of managing a house this size, the staff, the accounts, the endless decisions about menus and linens and repairs. In the afternoon, she walked the grounds. Ashford House sat on hundreds of acres, moorland, forest, a lake that reflected the gray sky like tarnished silver. She walked for hours sometimes, until her feet ached and her cheeks stung from the wind. The isolation should have felt oppressive. Instead, she found it oddly freeing. No one watched her here. No one judged. She could breathe. In the evenings, she dined with Clarence, always formal, always at opposite ends of that interminable table. They spoke of inconsequential things, the weather, the estate, idle gossip from the county. He never mentioned his investigation. She never asked. It was a bloodless sort of existence, comfortable but empty, like living in a painting. Until the night everything changed. It was late, past midnight. Henrietta had been reading in her sitting room, unable to sleep. A novel, something romantic and foolish that made her chest ache with longing for things she would never have. She'd just set it aside when she heard it, a sound, muffled, coming from somewhere deeper in the house. She stood, pulling her dressing gown tighter. Probably nothing. The house made noises at night, old buildings did, but something about this sound was different, urgent. She opened her door. The corridor was dark, save for a single candle burning in a sconce. The sound came again, louder now. A voice, male, distressed. Clarence. Her heart kicked. She followed the sound through the corridors, her bare feet silent on cold stone. The west wing gave way to the east. Here the walls were darker, the air colder. She'd never been to this part of the house. Clarence's private chambers, she realized. The part of Ashford House he'd claimed as his own. The door to what must be his bedroom stood ajar. Light spilled through the gap, and the sound, God, the sound. He was calling out. Words she couldn't make out, his voice ragged with something that sounded like pain. Henrietta hesitated. He'd been clear about their separate lives, clear that she was not to intrude. But this did not sound like a man who wanted to be alone. She pushed the door open. The room was a mess, blankets tangled, pillows on the floor. Clarence lay in the bed, eyes closed, caught in the grip of a nightmare so violent his body arched with it. Sweat sheened his bare chest. His hands clawed at the sheets as if trying to escape something only he could see. "No," he gasped. "Please, Grace, I'm sorry. He didn't wake. The nightmare held him fast. Henrietta moved without thinking, crossed the room, sat on the edge of his bed. "Clarence," she said softly. "Clarence, wake up." He didn't hear her. His breathing came in harsh pants now, desperate. "Grace," he moaned. I tried to save you." Who was Grace? A sister? A lover? The pain in his voice made Henrietta's throat tighten. She reached out, placed her hand on his shoulder. His skin was burning. "Clarence, you're dreaming. Wake up." His eyes flew open. For a moment he didn't see her, saw something else, something that made terror flash across his face. Then recognition came. He jerked upright, pulling away from her touch as if it burned. "What are you doing here?" His voice was rough, shaking. "I heard you. You were..." She stopped. "You were having a nightmare. Get out." He turned away, shoulders rigid. "You should not be here." I was concerned. I said get out. The words were a shout, harsh enough to make her flinch. Henrietta stood, hurt lancing through her. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace. I did not mean to intrude." She moved toward the door, made it 3 steps before his voice stopped her. "Wait." She turned. He hadn't moved, still sitting with his back to her, his head bowed. But his hands, she could see them shaking even from here. "I apologize," he said quietly. "That was unforgivable. You meant kindly." "Who is Grace?" The question escaped before she could stop it. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "My sister." Henrietta's breath caught. "Your sister?" "Yes." The word was barely audible. "She died 2 years ago. I'm sorry." She took a step closer. "How?" "She was forced to marry a man she did not love." His voice was flat now, empty. "Our uncle arranged it. Wanted the connection, the alliance. Grace begged me to stop it. But I was younger then, powerless. I could not refuse our uncle without risking everything." Henrietta's heart clenched. She knew where this was going. The man she married was cruel. Clarence continued. "I did not know how cruel until it was too late. He locked her away, beat her, broke her spirit piece by piece. When I finally discovered the truth, I rode to their estate. But I was..." His voice cracked. "I was too late. She'd taken laudanum, left a letter saying she could not bear another day." "Clarence," Henrietta whispered. "I held her as she died. He turned to look at her finally, and his eyes were devastated. She was 22 years old, and I failed her. Understanding crashed over Henrietta like a wave. That's why you saved me, why you were investigating Whitfield. I could not save Grace. His hands clenched on the sheets. But I could save you. I could stop Whitfield before he added another woman to his collection of corpses. I swore I would never fail again. Never stand by while a woman suffered because of a forced marriage. Henrietta moved closer, sat beside him on the bed, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. It was not your fault. What happened to Grace? That was not your fault. Wasn't it? His laugh was bitter. I knew the man was cruel. I heard rumors, but I did nothing. I was a coward. You were trapped by duty, by family obligation. Grace would not want you to carry this guilt. You did not know her. No. Henrietta reached out, covered his hand with hers. He didn't pull away this time. But I know you. I know you stood on a road at dawn and offered a stranger salvation. I know you spent months building a case against a murderer to protect women you'd never met. That is not the action of a coward. He looked down at their joined hands. His thumb moved just slightly, brushing across her knuckles. The touch was tentative, questioning. I dream of her most nights, he said quietly. Sometimes she's begging me to save her. Sometimes she's already gone and I'm holding her body. Either way, I wake knowing I failed. Then we are matched, Henrietta said. I lie awake thinking of what might have happened if you hadn't been there. If I'd been forced to marry Whitfield. If I'd become another Grace. His hand tightened on hers. You will never be another Grace, I swear it. I know, she squeezed back. Because you saved me. They sat in silence. The candle on his bedside table guttered low, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Outside, the wind howled across the moors. But here, in this room, something had shifted. The wall between them had cracked. Not broken, but cracked. You should return to your chambers, Clarence said finally. It is late. Will you be able to sleep? I don't know. Henrietta stood. But before she could leave, she turned back. If you have another nightmare, you may send for me. I don't mind. He looked up at her, surprise flickering across his face. Why would you do that? Because no one should wake alone in the dark. She moved to the door. Good night, Clarence. Good night, Henrietta. She returned to her chambers, climbed back into her cold bed, but she did not sleep. Instead, she thought about a duke who carried his sister's death like a wound that would not heal, who'd married a stranger to atone for sins that were not his own, who'd looked at her in the candlelight with something like gratitude. The wind rattled her windows. The letter arrived on a gray morning in late November. Henrietta was in the library, a room she'd claimed as her own these past weeks, filled with books that smelled of old paper and dust. She was reading when Mrs. Fairweather entered, her face carefully blank in that way that meant trouble. Your Grace, a letter has arrived. The messenger says it is urgent. Henrietta took the envelope, heavy paper, no return address, but the seal, she recognized that seal, the crest of the Whitfield family pressed into dark red wax. Her hands shook as she broke it open. Lady Henrietta, you thought you could escape. You thought a hasty marriage to Cavendish would protect you. How naive. I want what was promised to me. You were mine by contract, by agreement between our families. Your father accepted my money. That debt remains unpaid. I will have what is owed. And if the Duke believes he can stand in my way, he is welcome to try. But he should know. I am not a man who accepts defeat gracefully. You will be mine, Henrietta. One way or another. Yours in anticipation, Whitfield. The paper slipped from her fingers. Henrietta stood, her pulse hammering. He'd found her. Of course he had. She'd been foolish to think Whitfield would simply accept her disappearance. Men like him did not let go of what they considered their property. Your Grace? Mrs. Fairweather's voice was concerned. Are you quite well? I need to speak with the Duke. Where is he? In his study, Your Grace, but he left instructions he was not to be disturbed. Henrietta was already moving, through the corridors, down the stairs, across the entrance hall to the east wing. She'd never been to Clarence's study, never been invited. But this could not wait. She pushed open the door without knocking. The study was dark, despite the hour. Heavy curtains drawn, a single lamp burning on the desk. Clarence looked up from a scatter of papers, his expression shifting from surprise to alarm when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" She held out the letter. "He knows. Whitfield knows where I am." Clarence took the letter, read it. His jaw tightened with each word, and by the time he finished, his knuckles were white where he gripped the paper. "How did he get this to you?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "A messenger. Mrs. Fairweather received it." "Damn." He stood, moving to the window, pulled back the curtains slightly, scanning the grounds as if expecting to see Whitfield's men already approaching. "I'd hoped for more time." "More time?" Henrietta's voice rose. "You knew he would come?" "Of course I knew." He turned to face her. "Whitfield is not the sort of man to accept defeat quietly. I've been prepared for this." "Prepared?" She laughed, high and brittle. "He's threatening you, threatening us. How can you possibly be prepared for that?" "Because I have what he wants most." Clarence moved to his desk, pulling out a leather portfolio. Evidence. Testimony from servants. Medical reports from the physician who treated his second wife. Documentation of the injuries she sustained, the pattern of illness that was clearly poisoning. He opened the portfolio, showing her papers covered in cramped handwriting. "I have enough here to see him hang 10 times over." Henrietta stared at the documents. "Then why haven't you used it? Why not go to the authorities?" "Because until now, I had no witness who would testify publicly. Servants can be intimidated. Physicians can be bought. But you," his eyes met hers, "you rejected him publicly, fled to avoid marrying him. Your testimony, combined with this evidence, would be impossible to dismiss." Understanding dawned, cold and sharp. "You didn't just marry me to save me. You married me because I'm useful." "No." He stepped toward her, urgent now. "That's not... Henrietta, I married you because you needed saving. The evidence was secondary." "Was it?" She backed away. "Or was I just another piece in whatever game you're playing with Whitfield? You think I went to that road, stood in the mist waiting for you, because I wanted a chess piece?" His voice rose. "You think I spent 3 weeks preparing chambers for you, arranging gowns, ensuring you would be comfortable here, because you were useful? I don't know what to think." She pressed her hands to her temples. "You've told me nothing, given me nothing. You sleep alone, eat alone, shut me out of every part of your life except when you need me to play Duchess for the public. And now I discover I'm part of some scheme to bring down Whitfield." "It is not a scheme. It is justice." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. Grace died because no one would stand up to her husband, because no one would believe a woman over a titled man. I will not let that happen again. Even if it means using me, I am not using you. I am protecting you. His hands came up, hovering near her shoulders but not quite touching. "Henrietta, please. You must believe me." She wanted to. God, she wanted to believe that his concern was genuine, that the crack in his armor she'd seen that night in his chambers was real. But the letter in his hand reminded her of the truth. She'd traded one danger for another. Whitfield might want to kill her, but Clarence wanted to use her to destroy him. "What does he mean, one way or another?" she asked quietly. Clarence's expression darkened. "He means he will try to take you by force if necessary. That's why I've had men watching the perimeter of the estate since you arrived. That's why I've forbidden you to leave the grounds without an armed escort. You've had me watched." Her voice shook. "Like a prisoner, like someone precious." The words came out rough, unguarded. "Like someone I cannot afford to lose." Henrietta's breath caught. The way he looked at her, it wasn't cold anymore, wasn't distant. There was something raw there, something that made her heart stutter. "Clarence." A commotion outside, shouting, the sound of horses at full gallop. Clarence's head snapped toward the window. In an instant, his entire demeanor changed. The vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by someone hard and dangerous. He moved to his desk, pulled open a drawer, removed a pistol. "Stay here," he ordered. "Lock the door behind me." "What's happening?" "Whitfield." He checked the pistol's load with practiced ease. "He's here." Terror spiked through her. "You can't go out there alone. I am never alone on my own estate." He moved to the door. "My men will handle him, but if he makes it to the house, I will not let him take you." He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Henrietta stood frozen. Outside, the shouting grew louder. Men's voices, the clang of metal, a fight. She ran to the window, pulled back the curtain. What she saw made her blood run cold. Whitfield had come with an army. Dozens of men, armed with clubs and blades, swarming through the gates. Clarence's men met them, footmen and groundskeepers turned soldiers, defending their home with whatever weapons they could find. And in the center of it all, Whitfield himself. Tall, cruel-faced, scanning the windows of the house with eyes that promised murder, looking for her. The door burst open. Henrietta whirled, heart in her throat. But it was only Mrs. Fairweather, pale and frightened. "Your Grace, we must get you to safety. There's a passage." "No." Henrietta's hands clenched. "No, I won't hide. Your Grace, this is my fault. He came here because of me. I won't let Clarence and his men fight alone." She pushed past the housekeeper, ran through the corridors toward the entrance hall. Her mind raced. What could she do? She had no weapon, no training, but she had something else. She had her voice, her testimony, and she had witnesses. Henrietta burst through the front doors just as Clarence engaged Whitfield in the courtyard. Their swords clashed. Whitfield had drawn a blade, and Clarence had dropped his pistol in favor of meeting him on equal terms. "Cavendish!" Whitfield snarled. "You think you can steal from me? She was mine." "She was never yours." Clarence's voice was ice. "She is her own, and my wife. A marriage conducted in secret, without banns. The church will annul it easily enough. Try." Clarence's blade moved like lightning. "See how far you get." Henrietta ran down the steps. "Stop." Both men froze. Clarence's eyes widened in horror. "Henrietta, get back inside." "No." She turned to Whitfield. Her whole body shook, but she kept her voice steady. "You want me to testify to our marriage? Very well, I shall testify. I shall tell everyone in England how you tried to force me into marriage, how I fled in terror because I knew what you'd done to your previous wives, how the Duke saved my life." Whitfield's face twisted with rage. "You dare." "I dare." She took a step forward. "Because I have nothing left to fear from you. You wanted me as your next victim, but I will be your downfall instead." "Clever little bitch." Whitfield shifted his grip on the sword. "But you forget. I have 40 men here, and Cavendish has perhaps 20. The outcome is inevitable." "Is it?" A new voice, sharp and authoritative. Henrietta turned. A carriage had appeared at the gates, unmarked but clearly expensive, and from it stepped a man she recognized from portraits in the entrance hall. Older, distinguished, wearing the robes of a magistrate. "Lord Grenville," Clarence said, surprise flickering across his face. "Your Grace." Grenville surveyed the scene with cold disapproval. "I received your message regarding the Whitfield matter. I see I arrived not a moment too soon." "Message?" Whitfield's voice was uncertain now. "Indeed." Pemberton gestured, and more men appeared, constables, armed and official. "Marquis Whitfield, you are under arrest for the murders of Lady Alice Whitfield and Lady Margaret Whitfield. You will be taken into custody and held for trial." "This is absurd," Whitfield snarled. "You have no proof." "We have ample proof." Clarence lowered his sword. "Testimony, medical records, witness statements, and now, assault upon a peer of the realm and his household, conducted in front of dozens of witnesses." Whitfield looked around. His men were already backing away, realizing they'd attacked a duke's home, realizing they could hang for this. "No," Whitfield breathed. "No, you cannot." "Take him," Grenville ordered. The constables moved forward. Whitfield fought, but it was useless. Within moments, he was in chains, being dragged toward a prison wagon that had appeared behind Pemberton's carriage. As they passed Henrietta, Whitfield spat at her feet. "Whore," he hissed. "You'll regret this." "No," Henrietta said quietly. "You will." They took him away. Silence fell over the courtyard. Clarence's men began tending their wounds, righting overturned furniture. Grenville approached, his expression grave. "Your Grace, Duchess." He inclined his head. "I apologize for the delay in responding to your evidence. Had I acted sooner, this unpleasantness might have been avoided." "You acted when it mattered," Clarence said. "That is enough." Grenville left. The courtyard emptied, and Henrietta found herself alone with her husband, both of them breathing hard, adrenaline still singing through their veins. "You should not have come out here," Clarence said finally. "He could have killed you. He was going to kill you. I can handle myself. So can I." She stepped closer. "I meant what I said. I will testify. I will help you destroy him." Clarence's eyes searched her face. "Why? You could walk away from all of this. I could arrange an annulment, give you money, property. You need not be trapped in a marriage you never wanted." "Is that what you think I want?" Her voice broke. "To leave? I don't know what you want." He sounded lost. "I don't know how to read you." "Then let me make it clear." Henrietta reached up, cupped his face with both hands. "I don't want to leave. I don't want an annulment. I want—" She took a breath. "I want a real marriage, Clarence. With you." His eyes widened. "Henrietta, I know you married me out of duty, out of guilt over Grace. But these past weeks, living here, learning who you are beneath all the ice." She smiled through tears. "I've fallen in love with you. You cannot." But his hands came up, covering hers. "You cannot love me. I am brave," she interrupted. "Honorable." "Damaged, yes. Haunted by ghosts. But good. So good, Clarence. You saved my life. Let me save yours." He made a sound, half laugh, half sob. "I don't deserve you. You saved me first." "No." His thumb brushed her cheek. "You saved me, the moment you walked into my nightmare and refused to let me suffer alone." He kissed her. Not the chaste brush of lips from their wedding. This was real, deep. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, breakable. She kissed him back, pouring everything into it. All the loneliness, the fear, the hope she'd been carrying. When they broke apart, both of them trembling, Clarence pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he whispered. "God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me." "Then we're matched," Henrietta smiled. "Because you terrify me too." He laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. "Come inside, Duchess. Let's go home." They walked into Ashford House together. The trial took 3 months. Whitfield fought it every step of the way. Hired expensive barristers, called in favors, tried to intimidate witnesses. But Clarence's evidence was ironclad, and when Henrietta took the stand and testified about her father selling her to a known murderer, about fleeing in terror, about accepting marriage to a stranger rather than face Whitfield's cruelty, the jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Whitfield hanged on a cold February morning. Henrietta did not attend. Neither did Clarence. They'd done their part. Let justice finish the rest. Spring came to Northumberland like a blessing. The moors turned green. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible colors, purple heather, yellow gorse, white snowdrops pushing through the last patches of snow. The gardens at Ashford House, which Henrietta had thought dead, came alive under her care. She spent hours there, planting and pruning, bringing life back to spaces that had been neglected for years. Clarence watched her sometimes from his study window. Watched his wife, his real wife now, in every sense, kneeling in the dirt, her hands soil-stained, her face glowing with satisfaction. She'd transformed more than the gardens. She'd transformed him. The nightmares still came. But now, when he woke gasping, Henrietta was there. She'd moved her things to his chambers 3 weeks after Whitfield's arrest, and he'd been too grateful to protest. Now she slept beside him, her presence a talisman against the dark. And when the dreams got bad, she held him until the shaking stopped. He was learning to forgive himself. Slowly. Grace would have liked Henrietta, he thought. Would have loved how fierce she was, how brave, how she'd stood in a courtyard facing down armed men without flinching. "Your Grace?" Clarence turned. Mrs. Fairweather stood in the doorway, her stern face softened by something that might have been a smile. "Her Grace asked me to inform you that luncheon is ready. In the garden." "The garden?" "She insisted, Your Grace. Said the weather was too fine to waste indoors." Clarence closed his ledger. "Very well. Tell her I'll be there directly." He found Henrietta in the south garden, where she'd set up a small table beneath a flowering cherry tree. Pink petals drifted down like snow. She'd laid out a simple meal: bread, cheese, cold chicken, strawberries from the greenhouse. "I thought you might enjoy eating somewhere other than that dreadful dining room," she said as he approached. "That table makes conversation impossible." "I believe that was its purpose originally." He sat across from her. "My grandfather was not fond of talking during meals." "Your grandfather sounds like he was no fun at all." "He was terrifying, actually." Clarence accepted the plate she handed him. "But effective." They ate in comfortable silence. A bee hummed past, heavy with pollen. In the distance, Clarence could hear his men working, normal sounds of an estate in spring, planting, building, living. "I received a letter from my mother this morning," Henrietta said quietly. Clarence's hand stilled. They had not spoken of her family since the wedding. "What did she say?" "She apologized." Henrietta's voice was carefully neutral. "Said she'd known my father was wrong to arrange the match with Whitfield, that she should have stood up to him, protected me. But she didn't." "No." Henrietta looked down at her hands. "She didn't. She asks if she might visit, if you would permit it." "It is not my decision to make. This is your home. You may invite whomever you wish." "I don't know if I wish it." She met his eyes. "Part of me wants to see her, wants to believe her regret is genuine. But another part still hurts." Clarence finished softly. "Yes." He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "Then wait. There is no rush. Let yourself heal first." She nodded, squeezing his fingers. "What about you? Have you written to your uncle?" "No." His jaw tightened. "And I do not intend to." "Clarence." He forced Grace into that marriage. He knew what kind of man her husband was and did not care. "I will not forgive that. I'm not asking you to forgive." Henrietta's thumb stroked across his knuckles. "But carrying that anger, it's eating you alive. Perhaps I deserve to be eaten." "No." She stood, moved around the table to sit beside him. "No, you don't. Grace's death was not your fault. Your uncle's cruelty was not your fault. You cannot punish yourself forever for sins that were not yours. I should have done more. You were barely 20 years old, powerless against your uncle's authority. What could you have done? Something. Anything." His voice cracked. "I could have refused. Could have challenged him. Could have gotten yourself disinherited and left Grace with even less protection." Henrietta cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. You did what you could with what you had. And when you had more, when you had power and resources, you used them to save me, to save countless other women by destroying Whitfield. Grace would not want you to waste your life on guilt." "How do you know?" "Because she was your sister. And if you loved her half as fiercely as you love me, she would have loved you just as fiercely back. And love doesn't want the beloved to suffer." Tears stung his eyes. "I miss her." "I know." Henrietta pulled him close and he buried his face in her shoulder. "I know, my love. But you honor her best by living well, by being happy, by letting yourself heal." He held her as the cherry blossoms fell around them like benediction. Later, as the sun began to set, they walked back to the house hand in hand. In the entrance hall, Clarence paused before Grace's portrait. She smiled down at him, forever young, forever frozen in the moment before everything went wrong. "I promise," he whispered. "I promise I'll try." Henrietta squeezed his hand. That night, for the first time in 2 years, Clarence did not dream of his sister's death. Instead, he dreamed of spring. 2 years later, the nursery at Ashford House had been unused for a generation. Now it rang with laughter. Henrietta sat in the rocking chair by the window, cradling their daughter, Grace Margaret Cavendish, 8 months old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. The baby grabbed at Henrietta's necklace, gurgling with delight when it caught the sunlight. "You are too clever for your own good," Henrietta murmured, gently extricating her pearls from tiny fingers. "Just like your father." The door opened. Clarence entered, his cravat loose, his hair disheveled from a morning spent overseeing the spring planting. He'd taken a more active role in the estate management this past year, spending less time on investigations and more time simply living. "How are my girls?" he asked, crossing to drop a kiss on Henrietta's head before kneeling to bring himself eye level with their daughter. "Plotting mischief, I suspect," Henrietta said. "She's been eyeing the bookshelf. She cannot even walk yet." "Give her time, she'll be climbing before summer," Clarence laughed, something he did often now, easily. He took the baby, lifting her high until she squealed with delight. "Did you hear that, little one? Your mother thinks you're destined for trouble." "I know she is," Henrietta said dryly. "She has your stubbornness and your courage." He settled Grace against his chest, where she immediately grabbed his collar. "Speaking of which, the solicitor sent word. The refuge is officially open." The refuge, Grace House, they'd named it. A place in London where women fleeing violent marriages could find shelter, legal assistance, and support. Henrietta's project, funded by Clarence's fortune, staffed by people who understood that sometimes survival meant running in the dark. Already? Henrietta stood, moving to look out the window at the blooming gardens. "I thought it would take another month." Mrs. Fairweather proved remarkably efficient at hiring staff. Clarence joined her, Grace still in his arms. "They've already received 3 women, all safely away from their husbands, all being given the help they need to start again." Henrietta's throat tightened. Grace would be proud. She would. Clarence's free arm came around her waist. "As am I." They stood together, watching the gardens sway in the spring breeze. Beyond the grounds, the moors stretched green and gold. Somewhere out there, women were escaping, finding freedom, building new lives. Because 2 years ago, one woman had run at dawn, and a duke had been waiting. "I love you," Henrietta said quietly. "I love you too." Clarence kissed her temple. "Thank you." "For what?" "For running toward me instead of away. For saving me when I thought I was the one doing the saving. For giving me a life I never thought I deserved." "You deserve everything," Henrietta whispered. "Every happiness, every joy." The baby yawned, nestling closer to her father's chest. In the garden, a bird began to sing. The sun warmed the stone walls of Ashford House, turning the gray fortress golden. Somewhere in London, a woman knocked on the door of Grace House, desperate and afraid. The door opened. A kind voice said, "You're safe now." And in Northumberland, a family stood together in the light. Spring had come to Ashford House, and it had come to stay. The end. Thank you for staying until the end of Henrietta and Clarence's story. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with a first glance across a ballroom, but with a desperate flight at dawn and a stranger waiting in the mist. If this story touched your heart, please share it. What did you think of Henrietta's courage? Did Clarence's redemption feel earned? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until the next story, may you always find someone waiting in your path when you need them most.